I'm Ryan, and this is Roles in the Family, and today I am going to be ranking all of the Series 3 content of the solo-only board game Final Girl. If you haven't heard of Final Girl, this is, like I said, a solo-only board game, or at least primarily solo, where you are the final girl in a horror film, trying to survive, trying to defeat the killer, and this game has a very expandable plug-and-play nature to it in that the game consists of all these feature films that each come with a location and a killer, but you're free to mix and match any of them, which makes it very fun to get more content for it and get to kind of make all these different varied scenarios. And the scenarios themselves have a ton of variety within them, which brings me to the important caveat that I'm going to be ranking things here, but just understand just how arbitrary these rankings are, because it's so swingy what can happen in a game of Final Girl. And somebody's experience with a certain feature film may have been positive just because, you know, the randomness led to really good games, or it might not. And so it's really an excuse to talk about all this content and give some of my thoughts on it. I have played it quite a bit. Final Girl as a whole, I think I've logged, 72 plays. And of the new Series 3 content, I've played with every killer in every location at least 3 times, and I've played with them on their feature film as well as mix and matching across different feature films. So I feel like I'm at least at a point where I can talk about, I got over the hump of, feeling like I was doing learning games and feel like I can kind of talk about some of my experiences with some of these. I did make a video like this for Series 1 and 2, all in one video. I can link that up here if you want to check that out as well. Maybe someday I'll do a video, maybe ranking the actual feature films across everything. Right now, this is just going to be Series 3. I haven't played a lot of the older stuff recently because I've been playing the Series 3 stuff. It would have been a little difficult to compare. And when I say Series 3, I kind of mean everything I got as part of Series 3, which is going to be the 5 main feature films. I also have the special feature, The North Pole Nightmare, which I think is technically listed under Series 2, but for me, it's basically a Series 3, as well as some of the vignette expansion stuff. So it's everything I have. I think some of the Final Girls I got were actually promos in the previous set. So whatever the case, I'm ranking what I got. Another thing that's maybe worth knowing about my perspective coming into this game is I'm definitely coming from more of a, I would say, mechanical perspective of my enjoyment of the game. I am not a horror film guy. I don't like horror films. And so you may find that a little odd that I quite enjoy this game. But I find that horror as a theme actually works really well for both cooperative board games and then solo games. It's a big reason why I enjoy a lot of Lovecraftian themed cooperative games. It's just this kind of doom and gloom and lots of different things that can happen and bad things. I mean, it just lends itself well to this type of gameplay and lots of exciting, different varied things that can happen. So that's kind of why I enjoy the game so much. Whereas I know other people might be like, I love this feature film because I love the movie that the source material is, that it's clearly inspired by. So just know that I'm coming from a little bit more of a mechanical perspective here. Let's see. Did I have any other notes to call out initially? I don't think so. We got a lot of things to rank here. So let's kick it off with locations. So I've got 6 locations here, and my number 6 is the Merrick Warehouse. So this is kind of you're trapped in a warehouse. If you're playing with the Tormentor that comes in the same set, it's kind of this horrific death traps and stuff, that you're kind of trying to survive in this creepy warehouse. And kind of the mechanics on this map in particular is that all of the doors start locked. So you don't have the ability to save anybody from the beginning, but rather shuffled into the terror deck are cards that are going to have the doors unlock at different points in the game. Additionally, there's these big crate towers, what do we call them? Like rows of stacked crates. And there's these new actions in your action tableau to have both leap and climb that you can get by basically discarding some of the normal move actions. And these allow you to climb up onto those, leap from one to another. And so it's kind of like some specific movement cards to work with those that can help you kind of maybe get around the map a little more quickly by kind of shortcutting it. So why is this one at the bottom of the list for me? I think one of the main reasons is the whole dynamic of the doors being locked makes it very hard to kind of plan and play out this scenario. In most Final Girl games, a big focus from the beginning of the game is getting victims saved. You want to be reducing the number of victims that are out there for the killer to kill, as well as you want to be getting some of the benefits on your Final Girl and eventually getting your Final Girl ability. And this kind of turns that on its head in that you can't save them right away. And that's okay, except that I find that the randomness here is really impactful, right? Because you shuffled those click cards that are going to unlock them into the deck. So you really have no idea when they're going to open. But you also don't know the order they're going to open. And they're on the far ends of the location. So, you can hope that if I bring some victims this way, I'll be able to, this one will open. And then, you'll have the one on the entire other side of the map open first. And if you've ever played Final Girl, moving across the map is not an easy thing to do. It takes a lot of your resources to move around a lot. So I found this to be a little bit frustrating, a little bit hard to, I like when maps or just anything in the game kind of presents variables in a puzzle to solve, but I feel like because I was missing the variables of when these doors are going to open, I kind of was left having to just guess, maybe very thematic, but it just didn't work as well for me. And then the whole leaping, climbing crates mechanic was fine, but for me, I felt like it didn't add enough to justify the extra rule overhead. There's some things you have to remember with it. And if I'm going to increase the complexity in Final Girl of how many things I have to remember, I really want that complexity to be broadening the exciting situations that can happen or these types of things. And at least in my games of this, I didn't find that to really be the case. So yeah, it kind of fell to the bottom for me. Kind of just nothing here that I really stood out to me. And the way the doors played out, I found was kind of actually a negative in a lot of my sessions. Moving on to number 5 is Utopia. This is a very deserted Western kind of theme. And naturally, there are giant sandworms bursting out of the sand that will destroy things. I will say, it is nice to have a map that has really simple rules. I have more and more appreciated in Final Girl. While I love some of the complex killers and locations, it's nice to have some simple ones that it's okay, I know how this one works. I don't need to be in the rulebook all game. And this one is that way because it's simple. You're going to draw, I think it's 2 cards at the end of every, in the upkeep phase or the end of the killer phase. And it's going to be random locations on the map where these sandworms are coming out. And if there's a victim there, it's going to kill it. If you're there, you're going to get hurt. If the killer's there and the killer doesn't have any of these other ones with it, because naturally, this being Final Girl, it prioritizes the things that are worse for you in those types of situations. It could hurt the killer. And so this is quite random, right? This is oh my gosh, you're just starting the game and victims across the map are getting picked off. And so on one hand, it's a little bit frustrating and it just feels extra random, which is a little weird to talk about in a game like Final Girl that so much of it is random, but just the way it's presented in these ways that there's no way you could see it coming and there's no way you could do anything about it in a lot of the cases. Made it feel a little unforgiving, a little punishing. That said, there were elements about this that I liked. It is interesting. There's these rock outcroppings that if you have victims there, if you're there, you are safe from the worms. So there's this dynamic of let me rush, maybe not to get victims out, but to get victims protected so that I'm not as punished by this random element. And then there's also the element of you start to see which cards have been revealed. So okay, this location isn't going to get drawn again until the deck reshuffles because it's already been drawn. And so you can kind of start to see where safe places are on the map. The map also has this sinkhole mechanic. It didn't come up much in my plays, but basically a space on the map can get completely blocked by a sinkhole, and now you have to completely go around it. I kind of like this in practice just because it it dynamically changes the map as far as how connected it is and where you might have to go. I mean, it can be pretty brutal if it cuts you off in a very important situation. But I kind of like that, even though I didn't get to firsthand experience it a lot. So all in all, I would say this one is an average map for me. Like I would say Merrick Warehouse like actually leaned negative for me. This one I would happily play on Utopia. You'd be ready to have some games where you might be like, well, right out of the gate, it hit victims, and like sometimes that rush on Bloodlust with the killer right away is just going to really be a hard thing to overcome. So Utopia comes in at my number 5. Number 4, we have from the North Pole Nightmare special feature, Santa's Village. So this is kind of a fun, flavorful one because it's you're in the snow and at the North Pole and it's Santa's Village. And I felt like I just had good games on it. You know, I don't know. It's hard for me to remember all the like events and items that also make these locations unique. But I will say, these elves at this location are a pain in the butt because every time you move, all the victims are considered to be elves. And every time you move into a space, you have to lose a time for every elf that's there, which is really brutal and annoying. And you know, sometimes annoying is just annoying when you're playing the game. Sometimes it's like hard but fun. This is like kind of skirting the line for me. There were definitely some times where I was just kind of like frustrated by that fact. But I think overall I like it, because it makes the map so dynamic. When you're thinking about what routes are the best routes and how you should approach your turn, victims move around often or, you know, get killed off. And so if there's a group of victims or, you know, there's no victims this other way, it creates all these trade-offs in kind of like the time efficiency of taking these different routes. And it also changes up a little bit how you just go about rescuing victims and trying to walk through spaces with victims. So I think it's a nice thing that makes it feel different from other maps. I will say it's a hard one for me to remember. It's such a core rule. Like moving around, it's just so easy to move in somewhere and be thinking about other things and forget to spend the time for it. But overall, I've had good games on this map. And so it ends up somewhere in the middle here. And I guess that's all I have to say about that one. Onwards to number 3, which is Sunny Days Mall. So this comes in the set that's very much the Terminator scenario with the hunter as the killer. But you are in a shopping mall, which is kind of a cool change of pace from a lot of these other locations. And it's actually got a lot going on. So there's some things with the mall specifically. There's kind of these overhang balcony spaces that if ever something gets hurt on those spaces, they go over the balcony and take a damage, which I kind of like that from, it actually didn't happen much in my games. But I like just the possibility of is the kind of the cinematic moment, and then it kind of changes because you have to kind of go around to get back up. And so it can very much change the dynamic. You can also choose to jump over the balcony, which is likely to hurt you, but again, could be a really big play to in a certain situation. So I like what that adds into it. And then there's this element with the stores. If ever you or the killer take damage in these stores, you actually knock them through walls and you put out these things to show destroyed walls, and they take extra damage as well as leave a connection between these stores. Ironically, also not a thing I encountered a lot in my plays. For whatever reason, a lot of my fighting ended up kind of on the non-balcony, non-store spaces for some reason. It's also something that I'm almost sure I forgot at some point because you're thinking about attacking and sometimes you forget, oh, on this location, it goes through the wall. But this is another thing I think I overall like it. Honestly, the biggest downside is just hard to remember. But it's fun to have that possibility of like another way to do more damage, because a lot of times in Final Girls games, that's the puzzle, is like, how am I going to do enough damage if I don't find a good weapon or something? This kind of gives you another way to get some more damage. It's, again, kind of fun, cinematic, and kind of changes the map too, which I kind of like when maps have that dynamic element. Now, the weird thing about Sunny Days Mall is you always are also playing with the savior ally, which very much feels like part of the Terminator scenario. Like it is pretty much Terminator 2 with like the kid, you're trying to like protect him because he needs to live for the future. It's been a long time since I've seen the movie. But so it makes like so much sense when you're playing that scenario that it almost threw me off guard when I went to play Sunny Days Mall with another killer, and I was like, oh, wait a second, this whole savior ally is still in the game because it's part of the mall. So it's a little weird, but I do find that it adds a fun dynamic into the game. So you have this savior ally that's a special victim on the board, and the killer is like targeting that victim, like instead of you. And if the savior dies, you're going to lose the game. And the savior is kind of this punk kid that at first doesn't trust you at all. And every turn you have to resolve these cards where it's going to do some action based on how much the savior trusts you at that point in time. And so at the beginning of the game, these are like doing all negative effects, or he's like running away or running towards the killer. But if you use these new action cards in the tableau to go to the space and try to convince this person to trust you, you can move up this trust level, which basically makes those random cards at the end of the turn start to actually be positive effects. And so you actually get to an interesting place with the savior where, like, if you get it high enough, you now have the ability to move the savior or he'll move with you. This set kind of introduces this new ally concept where it's its own card that kind of has these cubes that take actions with a cooldown. And so you kind of, once you have him on your side, you can be taking actions with him and kind of using him to your advantage. But you're kind of in an interesting spot of, do you rescue him? Do you get him out the exit and basically guarantee that you're not going to lose because of him dying? Or do you keep him around because he's useful and can do good things? And if there's still cards left in his deck, they're typically doing good effects if you've built up the trust. So it's an interesting dynamic, and I've had some fun games with it, and it makes the end game kind of interesting when you have you and you also have this ally that you're kind of trying to figure out, with the caveat here being that it's an ally that if that ally dies, you lose the game. So you need to be very careful about how you approach that. So one that I think this one is the one I had the hardest time remembering the rules generally across the whole location, but I do find that overall I like it. And it had some good games on it. Onward to number 2. We've got Hellscape. This is a shifting, hell-themed kind of, I don't know. I don't know the parallels to movies or anything. But the very interesting thing on this map is that it's a 3x3 grid of rectangles make up the map. And the 4 non-corner, non-center spaces are actually tiles that you randomize at the beginning of the game. So it's kind of a randomized map. But then at the end of every turn, you have to roll these 2 dice, which if they're different results are going to swap 2 of those tiles. And if they're the same result, they're going to flip that tile because each tile is double-sided with different map elements on either side. So you've got this, more than any other Final Girl location, this changing, shifting landscape that you're trying to navigate. And most interestingly, I think, a landscape that often is things are cut off from each other. And so this actually was a really unique aspect of this. And actually, I should mention first that there's a new action in the tableau. I think it's called Hell Shift or something like that. That you can use to manipulate them. So you're not just at the mercy of those dice. You can get that and you can move things by getting successes on that to your advantage, which is a new interesting piece of the puzzle. But this aspect of you being separated from things, one time it can be very frustrating, right? Because you're like, I need to get here and I literally cannot, or it's like so long around, and that's where you maybe need to prioritize manipulating the things. But the other thing I found so interesting is there were a lot of times where the killer was not able to reach me. And so because you can manipulate the map, I actually found more than any other map, at least in my games, your ability to stall here is a lot larger. Like usually if the killer gets to their finale, it's like pretty brutal with their movement and everything that it's like, okay, you better be ready to fight because you're not going to be able to run away. Here, I actually had a really weird game where I got this item that I could hurt myself to hurt the killer regardless of where the killer was, which basically led to this optimal strategy of like, okay, I'm going to basically just keep manipulating things and moving so that the killer can never get to me. I'm going to keep hurting myself to hurt him, and then I'm going to heal myself. And I was kind of able to keep that going. Now, it took forever, which was like actually a downside. It was one of those moments where you're like, I think this is my optimal strategy, but man, is it going to be a slog to do this all, because I had to keep hurting myself, and then I would have to like heal myself before I could do it again. And I needed to make sure that I was prioritizing him not being able to get to me. And so it was like kind of cool in that it was like a unique experience, but it also was like kind of a not the most fun end game of like a half hour of playing out this kind of weird dynamic. So yeah, I really like how different it is from other maps, and I like how dynamic it is and how you have some control over that. I do think the experiences are probably pretty swingy here. I think you can get some weird games with the dynamics of it. I think you can have very bad luck, which is true of a lot of things in Final Girl. But with how things move, but overall, I actually found I really enjoy this one, and really coming from the perspective of like, having a lot of different locations, a lot of different killers that I can mix and match. This is one that feels really unique, and like playing a game on here is very different from playing on these other locations. So that pushes it up to my number 2. And I should mention it's pretty low complexity, and that actually is a big advantage. Like, you just have to like know how to roll the dice at the end and move the things around. There's not like a whole lot to keep track of here. Which brings me to my number 1, which is Falconwood, which is the unabashedly Stranger Things inspired location. And the thing that really makes Falconwood shine, first, it's a fun setting. If you've seen Stranger Things, I mean, you've kind of got the neighborhood and like the school, small town feel. There's kind of like the government lab. So kind of just, I like the different things in play and how those can play into the narrative of what you're picturing is happening. But really what elevates this one is that every game you're going to pick one of, I think, 4 different missions that are included that are going to change what's happening and what you're doing on this map, and provide this objective that you must complete before you can completely defeat the killer. And so what this does is it almost makes it feel like 4 different maps in terms of kind of like the uniqueness of the experiences that you're going to get out of it, and kind of the variety there. Like on one game, you might be searching for your best friend, and you have to find clues to narrow down where your best friend is so that you can go to them and get them as an ally. But another one, I was like being hunted by all these like kind of NPC tokens that were trying to get me. And that was a very different feel, that I needed to like take these things out and try to survive. And so I just really like that. My favorite thing in Final Girl was being able to combine things and get such varied experience, that sandbox feeling of what's going to happen this session, and Falconwood providing a few different, very, very different feeling scenarios. And I've had very positive plays with the ones I've done so far. So that makes Falconwood my favorite of all of the locations. With that, let's get going on killers. So killers, I actually have 7 because I'm including there's the Terror from Destiny vignette. So each of the series has had kind of these little box, smaller killer scenarios that are apart from a feature film. And that is a great segue into Terror from Destiny being my lowest rated killer. And in fact, if I'm being honest, probably my lowest rated across all the series. So this one, it's kind of this like Final Destination, people are like predestined to die kind of theme. And you're going to be putting out these, I'm going to forget the terminology. I think they're consequence cards and then punishment cards assigned under them. And then there's this little card that like you randomize the order of the 5 like special victims, and it's all face down. So you don't know what the order is going to be. And there's going to be cards in the horror deck that's going to start killing them. And whenever you kill one, you need to see if you basically have like saved that person in the right order. Like whenever you save a special victim, you're going to put it on the next one on the track. And if you didn't do it in the right order, they're going to still die the way that they did. And so you have to use these new, I'm going to forget the name, premonition. I don't know. There's these cards that let you look at some of the hidden information. So you need to get those actions, use them so you can see, okay, these are the ones that are coming next, or here's what the consequences and punishments are going to be, which I'll talk about in a second. And so once you know, you can kind of try to make sure that you save people in that order. When you don't save them and they die, they are going to go on the corresponding consequence card, and then it's going to move to the next consequence card. And that means that at the end of the game, that consequence card is going to trigger. Now, you're probably going to want to know what that is by using that special action. But the consequence is going to be some condition that at the end of the game, when the horror deck is out, you're going to have to evaluate every consequence card that you didn't save that person, so that you moved the token onto. And it'll say something like, you need to discard this much time worth of action cards, or you need to do an attack that is this much at that point. And if you can't meet it, then you have to flip the punishment card under it, which is going to be some variable amount of health that you lose. And if you can execute the whole row and not die, then you win the game. Otherwise, you lose. And so this one, first of all, it's quite a bit of rules complexity. It took a bit to understand exactly how this works and to manage it. And like I said before, if you're going to add rules complexity, the experience really has to elevate. And for me, the experience was honestly probably lower than a lower complexity one. I found that it really changed the feel of the game and how I interact with the map. I mean, everything starts to be about getting these people out, but also about learning the information. I mean, the one time that I won this scenario, I just went so heavy on the premonition or whatever that I basically said, I'm not going to save the first person. Let's look at all the other ones. And then through a sequence of events, I actually did a really good job of saving those people. And so I knew that I was going to get those. I knew the thing that for the consequence of the one that I didn't save, I was prepared for it. I actually got to a point where I was like, I am ready to win, but there's like 4 cards left in the deck, but there's like not a lot that can happen because like there isn't a actual killer on the board, and I already have like kind of taken care of the next victims. So it was a weird like last 4 turns. Like I don't think I've ever really had this in Final Girl. If I kind of just like did nothing. There like wasn't anything that was going to really like improve my chances of winning. And then to top it off, the last card I get is the last terror card, like randomized the consequences. So the one that I had prepared for and knew got switched out, and so then the end game, it ended up just being some random one, which I ended up surviving, but it all just felt kind of like, I don't know, anticlimactic and kind of just like, well, I prepared all this way just to have like to sit around for a few turns and then have it changed up anyway and still win. The other thing here is I said I'm not like I'm not theme first with this game, but I really like how the theme creates the situations and the gameplay that comes out of it. But I will say this is the one of anything where the theme seems like the biggest disconnect to me. You get a card that you pick one of the cards that's like the order tracker, and it's something like a death coaster or like this big car crash, which I think is implying that this is like how these fated victims are going to die. But then you're in whatever location you are, and they die like within that location, and it's like, wait, where's the roller coaster? Like, where does this come in? And they're dying at different times, and like, I don't know. The theme kind of made no sense to me as far as like my ability to picture the narrative, which I really do enjoy in Final Girl. I didn't really know how to picture the narrative in this. There's a weird thing that like if they die on the map before their fated death, they go into limbo. And then, so I think there's a lot of things they did here clever mechanically, I think, to kind of achieve what they wanted. But for me personally, big theme disconnect, and it was a lot of rules complexity for an experience that honestly I didn't enjoy. Probably my 2 plays of this were among my least favorite Final Girl games ever. So one that I'm probably not going to hold on to and is at the bottom of my list. My number 6 is The Tormentor from the Merrick Murders feature film. This I know is inspired by like the Saw films, which I have not seen and have no interest in seeing. It is definitely pushing the boundaries of kind of like what I want in kind of the horror theme. It's getting kind of torture-y, and it's like, okay, that's not really my speed. But it's a very unique mechanical killer in that the killer is off the map, and instead victims are appearing in these different death traps that are going to go through these steps and then ultimately kill that victim. And you need to go to the death trap and perform different actions to release them. Which is kind of cool, and I appreciate kind of like the way that this is very different from other things. I have to say though, my experiences of this is like really, really brutal. I found that almost every killer card, or like the majority of killer cards, brought out new traps. But every trap takes several turns to take care of. I mean, you need to go move to them. You can bring a victim along to get extra rolls, but usually these steps on the card are going to take multiple turns of doing something, buying the right action card so that you can do the next one. And so when I had games where it was like, okay, I'm moving over to start this one, and now another one came out. Okay, I got to the first one and did the first one, and now a third one came out, and every turn, every death trap is progressing. And so it just felt like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do any of this? And I think I realized as I went on, okay, you need to prioritize. You're not going to save everybody. You need to say, this death trap, we're not even going to go to that person. We're going to focus on this new one that's closer because we might be able to prevent it. And when I played it with that more in mind, I had a more positive experience of it kind of being a little more strategic, but it still felt weird. It felt like I wasn't engaging with the location as much as a killer that's moving around on the map. I felt like I didn't have any time to go search or do any kind of preparation because it was like the death traps. And sometimes you get caught in a death trap and you have to, and now everything else is put aside while you figure that out. So yeah, the combination of it being just really punishing, and for whatever reason, this was the kind of punishing that went more towards not fun for me personally. And kind of weird pacing. I mean, the game I did win, I was kind of I was able to stop a few of the death traps, chose ones not to handle, but you're kind of just waiting it out and trying to survive until the tormentor comes out at the end. But I kind of felt like I didn't even do that good of a job on the death traps. I just did a good job of like dealing with the consequences of the death traps so that I would survive. And so it all just felt kind of weird, kind of like letting all the terrible things happen while I waited it out and then fighting this one at the end. So yeah, I think this is probably, of all the big box feature film killers, probably my least favorite across all of the series. And actually, I am getting to the point with Final Girl where having all this content and having it all be mix and match, there start to be kind of diminishing returns on getting more and more because I don't play the game, 10 times a week. Like, I'm not going to be able to do all these different combinations and play at that, get back to some of this content that much. So I actually am starting to think about, like, what do I want to keep? And with the Merrick Warehouse being my bottom location, the Tormentor being my bottom killer, it is a feature film that I am planning on not keeping around for myself because I'd rather play the ones I like more. Number 5. Killer is Slayer from the Falconwood Files. Now, I really like this one conceptually. The Slayer is pulling victims into the mirror dimension. They come out as kind of these gray meeples then, where he can then kill them. You would have to go into the mirror dimension to rescue them and bring them back. You also have to go into the mirror dimension to actually confront and attack the Slayer. And so I actually really like it. It's not too rules heavy. There's a little bit going on, but once you kind of wrap your head around it, it's not too bad. Honestly, this one I think is lower just because my games with it weren't as interesting as I was hoping they would be. It felt like oftentimes he would pull victims into the mirror dimension, and then it was just like a delayed turn to killing that victim. Like, it didn't really have much of a different outcome than if he had just killed it right away. Because usually I'm not close enough or able to react quick enough to like get into the mirror dimension and save this victim. And so I did like the dynamic of needing to like go into the mirror dimension to do the final attack against the killer. You got to kind of plan for it, and you don't want to stay in the mirror dimension because you take damage at the end of your turn. And so I like what's going on here, and I had good games with it, but I feel like I've yet to like have that game where I'm like, oh man, the way that killer worked and that did that, it was just such an interesting game that I get with a lot of the other killers. So I think that pushed it down my list a little bit. It also is a little similar in feel to Dr. Fright from the first series, who had this like sleep mechanic, and you had to be like asleep to be able to, in like the dream, whatever, to attack him. And so there's a little bit of maybe feeling a little less novel when we've kind of already seen a killer that had a little bit of a similar thing. But it does have a different dynamic going on here with kind of the pulling the victims into that mirror dimension. So Slayer is my number 5. Number 4, we've got the Eyeless. The Eyeless is some kind of alien creature, can't see, but operates off of sound. Honestly, what pushes this up my list a little bit is just the complexity to uniqueness ratio. The complexity here is really low. One of the least complex ones in the series. All you have to know is whenever you play a card, you increase your noise. And then when you're resolving eyeless cards, sometimes it'll say if your noise threshold is above this worse effect happens. And so it's very much a risk game of how many cards do I play? Am I willing to go to 3 or 4 noise to take the risk that if the next card is one of those, which it might not be, it could be a location card, it could be an iOS one that doesn't have that, but if it is, it could be really bad and could jump straight to my space and attack me or something like that. So kind of a fun dynamic there, and I liked how it changed how I interacted with the action tableau, because suddenly more expensive cards you're kind of incentivized to play them, right? Because playing a card that's 5 cost is still only 1 card. And so it only does the noise by 1. And so I found going for a distraction, which is I think a 3 cost card that can reduce the horror. Well, that is better for my noise management than playing both focus cards that come in the 0 cost standard cards, because then I'm doing 2 cards to basically get the same thing. So I did like how it made me kind of think different, maybe use some cards that I don't use as often in my Final Girl games, because I definitely lean towards often getting more cheaper cards simply because that ability to convert 3s and 4s to successes by discarding cards, it just helps to have cards on hand. But I liked that here. I also liked there's this element of sound with items. Now it's very kind of up to your own judgment. You basically, whenever you get an item, have to determine, is this a silent thing, a quiet item, or is this a loud item? And you have to kind of assign it to it, but it's usually pretty obvious. Like, this is a gun. It's pretty loud. Dynamite. But I did like that this kind of, because the items are location specific, but playing the iOS there changes the dynamics of those items, because suddenly the louder items are higher risk because they raise the sound when you do it. You might, something that maybe is like an item you wouldn't have considered before, it's like, well, but it doesn't do any noise, like that actually could be more helpful than getting this weapon or something. So I thought that was kind of a fun way to kind of inject some variability into the location, what the location is bringing to the table. And I've had fun games with the iOS, although I will say the iOS feels pretty hard. You don't know when you're at risk to push the sound or not. But sometimes if you if the wrong thing happens, you can end your game very quickly with this one. But yeah, I enjoy this one. I'm a big fan of balancing complex killers and locations with ones that are just easy to pull out and understand how they work. Number 3, speaking of the opposite end of the spectrum, this is probably the most complex killer in the set, but is still up on my list because a lot of times once you get over the hump of learning it, that complexity can lead to a lot of interesting scenarios in your games. And this is the Hunter from The Killer from Tomorrow, basically the Terminator. But what's interesting about this one is it isn't just one Terminator. It's kind of the Terminator 2 scenario where the first Terminator is coming and basically you need to defeat that Terminator. But then the second one is going to come. So it's the Mark V comes out first. The Mark V is going to be trying to hunt you down and you need to try to defeat it. But eventually the Mark X is going to come out, the Mark 10. And if you haven't defeated the Mark V will actually just die at that point. But what's interesting, the Mark X is super powerful, going to absolutely, it's like the newer model that's going to just wreck you. So kind of the arc with this that you're trying to do is defeat the Mark V, and then you're able to pick up his cybernetic parts, repair him, so that you can then use the Hunter, the Mark V, as an ally when the Mark X comes. And so this is similar to how the Savior was an ally card for Sunny Days Mall. You can get the Mark V as an ally that you're then able to use and take actions on, which I really do like how that changes the dynamic of the end game, because you now have this other entity that you can work with to try to strategically take down the enemy. Unlike the Savior, you're not going to lose if the Mark V dies. So oftentimes it's how much can I get out of the Mark V and then let the Mark V take a hit and die to buy me a turn, to try to finish it off. And so I found that actually was a fun, interesting puzzle. You just really had to get over the hump of the rules overhead on this one, because there kind of is a lot to understand. When you read the rules for the first time, it actually feels worse than it actually is. But it is more to keep track of than a lot of these. And when you're playing on a complex map like Sunny Days Mall, then it's really a lot. It's almost, I actually found this in Series 2. I think it was the Alien set that I felt that the location and the killer were both more complex. I don't know if that's intentional, that they try to do some of the more complex things together. Maybe it's because whoever designs the feature film has a tendency towards that. But what I find is that if you buy that feature film, it's like doubly complex. It would almost be nice to learn the complex one with a simple one. And so you got to kind of know, if you've played Final Girl, how much you enjoy the more complex ones versus the lesser complex ones. But this is one where I felt that the complexity like elevated the experience and the possibilities of what can happen. My games of this have ended in very different, interesting ways, in ways that feel very different from other games of Final Girl I've played. And so that pushes it up my list because I love having another plug and play killer that can bring those kind of fresh things to the table. Number 2, I was surprised to see moving up my list as I was doing these rankings, and I think part of it is I just have had good games with this killer, and maybe that's the randomness of the game just happened to pan out that way. But I think it's also a good example of balance of kind of not too much complexity, but getting a lot of interest out of it. And this is Krampus, the Horned Devil. And so Krampus has this mechanism where he basically drops presents around. So there's all these little present tokens, and he like rolls a die to like drop them in spaces next to him. And these presents vary from slight good effects, slight bad effects, quite good effects, quite bad effects, but also these presents that are either Santa's presents or they're, I'm going to forget some kind of Krampus bad present. And so this is interesting because it starts putting out these presents that'll stay on the spaces they're on. If ever a victim is in a space with a present, they open it and it immediately resolves the effect, which could be maybe something good. More often it's going to be something bad. And if it happens to be one of those Santa gifts, it actually gets rid of it. They take it for themselves. So you don't get the benefit of it. And so what this does is Krampus operates the map. It's, again, that kind of dynamic map element of where the presents are. There's kind of the added... A lot of times they're getting dropped on victims or with victims that they get opened right away, and that kind of injects a little change into what's currently happening. Gives you reason to clear out victims to maybe have that happen less often. But I also kind of like the push your luck of when you have an opportunity to go to a present, do you go open it yourself, knowing that like there's probably a 50 or higher % chance it's going to be something bad for you, but something bad that a victim is probably going to open eventually anyway. But if it's good, that helps you. And if it's a Santa's gift, you get to draw from that deck and get some item that are really, really powerful items. So I like that kind of opportunity for that. And a lot of times in Final Girl, when the odds get stacked against you, you got to start making some swing for the fence moves of like trying some things to give yourself a chance. And I like that this introduces some new swing for the fence. It's like, I'm going to go for this because maybe I'll get a Santa's gift and I'll be able to use it. And it's fun because you don't see those Santa and Krampus gifts like every game. I think there's only like 4 in each deck, but they don't come out that often, which I like because like other things like events and items in the location, it's fun to have things that only come out, one in a bunch of games so that it really makes that game feel unique and defined by that. So yeah, I've had good games with it. I think there is a bias here of, I'll have to see as I play it more, does that trend continue? And I don't know how much of that is, his terror deck composition of things he's doing. It's hard for me to remember those types of things when I'm doing this list. But in my experience, I quite like Krampus the Horned Devil as a Final Girl killer. Which brings me to my number 1, a surprise here. Because I'll say thematically, this is not I talked about like the Merrick Warehouse set kind of pushing further than I want to into kind of torture horror. This is kind of more into, this is from the Hell to Pay, kind of very hell, creepy, spiritual scenario. And this is Razorface. So not really a thematic thing that I'm drawn to in this character. But let me just say that the complexity to interest ratio here is among the best of any of the Final Girl killers that I've played with. Like Razorface rule sheet is almost nothing because all you have to do is draw from his little deck of afflictions 3 afflictions. And these are going to be 3 things that you need to do before you can defeat Razorface. And so it's in some ways a little bit similar to Falconwood in that you kind of have this thing that you need to accomplish before you can defeat him. And these might be things like you need to hit them for a certain threshold of damage. You need to hurt yourself or do something. I'm forgetting what a lot of them are. But you basically are given this little puzzle of now, okay, I know what's here. Like, it's open information. How am I going to approach this game? What order am I going to do these? Oh, this is one that I have to permanently trash a zero cost card, one of my zero cost cards that typically you're like constantly cycling. Okay, maybe I want to do that one last because I want to use them as long as possible. But I think that one had like a negative effect if like his dark power is already revealed when you do it. So it's like, I want to do it before he does his dark power. And so it just ends up being a very interesting puzzle, but an interesting puzzle with like nothing to remember. Like, I don't have to go back to the rule sheet. The cards on them just say what they do, but then it's also very variable because you're always drawing 3 randomly from the deck. And so the combinations here of what you can get is very, there's a lot of different possibilities. And so that just really elevated this one for me. It reminds me a little bit of like, trading card games. If you think of something like Magic the Gathering, where like the core rule set is very simple, but the complexity comes from the text on cards. That's a little bit how I feel about this, of like, I don't need to remember anything, and the cards will tell me in the moment what I need to do and what I need to remember. So this one like overcame, despite not really being my jam thematically. He's kind of a creep, but it creates a fun puzzle, and I really, it's interesting weighing some of these complex killers where the complexity really does aid it, like the Hunter, with something like this where the low complexity is really part of what I like about this killer. But that was enough to raise it to my number 1, Razorface. Hey, it's Ryan from the future, where I have realized that I completely forgot to talk about the special character packs that came with my Series 3 content. This is kind of a new concept in Final Girl. There were 2 special character packs. There was Carolyn's Revenge and Grandma's Grudge are the names of the packs, and they're kind of... they replace the Final Girl that you're using in any given scenario, but have some extra rules and extra things going on. And I did play with them, so I figured I'll record a quick follow-up here to make sure I talk about them briefly. I will say I'm not planning on keeping these, so maybe it makes sense that they're kind of at the bottom of my Final Girl list, but I'll talk a little bit about why that is after I kind of overview what's actually going on in each of these. So first we have Carolyn's Revenge, which if you are familiar way back with Series 1 of Final Girl, there's the poltergeist scenario where Carolyn is like the little girl in that scenario where you need to be rescuing her and getting her out, and that's kind of how you defeat the poltergeist. This is now the future where apparently Carolyn has acquired psychic powers and is coming back and getting her revenge. I actually didn't play it on the poltergeist scenario. You can play it on any scenario, though. There's some extra cards. It definitely is designed that you could kind of play it with that poltergeist scenario. But this is going to add a few different things. You end up using this Carolyn card as your Final Girl, but you also are going to have a change to what cards are in the action tableau. There's going to be some of these new kind of psychic cards that Carolyn can use. Some of them you can buy directly with time. Some of them you have to get either through Carolyn's ability or rewards for rescuing victims, or by some of the other cards that you can buy can allow you to get the higher level cards. But there's going to be this new concept of doing psychic damage. It's kind of indicated by a blue damage icon. And there's a little tracker that shows how much psychic damage you have done. And this is basically giving you a new way that you could win the game. Like, instead of defeating the killer the normal way, if you can get a lot of psychic damage on the enemy, then there's one of the cards in the tableau that costs 6. It's a very expensive one to do psychic expulsion. And that is basically going to let you roll dice equal to how much psychic damage you have. So this is probably the most dice you can possibly roll in Final Girl, because I mean, when I was playing it, I got up to 8 or 9 rolling dice. But in this case, only star results are going to matter. You're not going to be able to like convert 3s and 4s. And you're basically trying to get more stars than the number of victims that have died. And so as the game is going on, if you're kind of going for this win condition, you want to be not having too many victims die while also doing the psychic damage to allow you to have a chance at this. Now, if you don't exceed how many victims have died, you get to remove that many. So you're basically making it easier for you to try again on a future turn. But this is a 6-cost card, so it's not like it's easy. You basically didn't buy anything else. It's not easy to continually make these attempts. And so it's an interesting dynamic, kind of an interesting different thing for you to play for. I definitely played for it and almost got it, but didn't quite exceed and wasn't able to get another chance to do it before I died. But an interesting kind of dynamic with this alternate win condition that you can go, as well as some of the other psychic. I think there's like a psychic travel and some other kind of cards that you're able to use there. So the second one here is Grandma's Grudge, where you play as Grandma. This kind of goes with the Little Red Riding Hood feature film that's in Series 2, but you can play it with any combination of killer and location. And it, again, is going to replace some of the cards that you have available in the action tableau. Specifically, you don't get any of the normal movement cards. Instead, you get like these slower walk cards. Grandma takes more time, but maybe is a little more reliable with her movement. But also gets rid of all the rest cards. Grandma's very fragile, so she can't really like rest to get health back. However, she has much more ability to manipulate and work with the other victims on the board who all love Grandma so much. And so she has cards that she can actually bring victims toward her. Victims, whenever they panic, will actually choose to panic towards Grandma. She has a help card that if she would take damage in her space, she could instead play that to pull an adjacent victim into her space to take the damage. So everybody can kind of help protect Grandma, but it also can lead to kind of a big attack because there's a card, I forget what it's called, but you basically can do damage equal to the number of victims in your space. So if you can kind of rally everybody together, you can kind of do this group attack with Grandma. And so this was kind of an interesting dynamic of being kind of like slower around the board, but trying to kind of work with manipulating the victims to try to both protect and maybe set up an attack here. And that's kind of the extent of what's going on with Grandma. Both of these also have some like special items that they start with, and there's maybe some difficulty scaling on how many of the items you start with. And so I'll kind of talk about both these together, because I feel very similarly about both, which is that they were fun, they were interesting, kind of twist. For me personally, it's not where I'm looking for more variation and more complexity in Final Girl. I love getting different locations and killers and being able to, mash them together and getting a little bit of spice with one of the standard Final Girls getting put in. This is bringing in a lot more rules on that, in the Final Girl part of that, on top of the rules of the location and the killer. And for me, when I'm, going to be going to the game and I like to just like pick random combinations that I haven't played yet and haven't played in a while, it now feels a little weird to be like, okay, do I cycle these Final Girls with the other Final Girls? Is this like a scenario I play more often? And it really is kind of leaning more to that scenario-based play. And I think that's who this is going to appeal to more, is like if you really like kind of building a very specific thematic scenario and playing it, these are going to give you a really kind of cool twist on that. But if you're maybe more like me and you kind of like just the mix and match of creating these generic varied scenarios, like mix and matching the content, then these maybe not are going to be less impactful than some of the other killers and locations that can go together. I don't know. Maybe it is just a personal preference that it's just not really where I'm looking for the variation in the game. So that's why I'm not keeping it, but I could see this. They're well implemented, and I had like a good time playing with it. I just have to kind of pick and choose how I want my Final Girl experiences to be, and this isn't something that I think I'm going to come back to. But with that, let's send it back to talk about the rankings of my standard Final Girls. All right. We're going to move on to Final Girls. Now, I will say, whether you played Final Girl or not, like, Final Girls are kind of a little spice into the scenario. The killers and the locations are the big ones. And so I like having lots of different Final Girls and mixing it. I usually kind of go through them all evenly. But if you're like buying sets, I would base your decision 100% off of the killer and the location. And the Final Girls are kind of just nice to haves. That said, I'm going to rank them all for you. So we got 15 Final Girls that I got here as part of my Series 2 content. I like all of them. There's no negative ones here at the bottom of the list, but there's maybe ones. And this is probably the most arbitrary of any of these. If you wiped my brain and had me do this exercise again, we'd probably get a completely different list. But let's go through it. First, we've got Cat. Somebody had to be at the bottom. And Cat takes a lot to get to her final ability because of the 6 victims needing to be saved. Has some nice abilities. The move 2 spaces is nice. There. But then when you get to that ability, it's a very specific ability. You have to have a gun. And I think that's what pushes it to the bottom here. Is there's just a lot of times where the way the scenario goes and what's available to you, you just might not have a gun or have access to a gun. And so when things are that specific, it's a little harder for it to be higher in my rankings. But it is a fun one if you can find a gun. Number 14, I've got Mrs. Claus, and Mrs. Claus is all about health, as is evident from her victim rewards, which I'll give you health, which is a little weird because often at the beginning of the game when I'm saving victims, I haven't gotten hurt yet. So like health rewards aren't as impactful. Maybe that's a reason to go confront the enemy early so you can actually like take some damage and then heal. But I find that if I'm playing this, it's often that like I'm not actually going to get any benefit from these victim rewards. And then her ability, when you unlock it, is that you get all your health back and you no longer have a maximum health limit, which is very fun and unique in what this allows you to do. I do think it lends itself to more of a stall tactic. I had a game with Mrs. Claus where I forget exactly what was happening, but I was able to pump up her health to like 15. And it was like the optimal strategy to like pump up and kind of delay confronting the enemy, which, you know, you get into some situations where you're kind of, I talked about it with that Hellscape where I was able to like stay away and keep using this item to hurt myself, where it's like I'm finding an optimal strategy that's kind of tedious and like feels like I'm cheesing the game a little bit. So Mrs. Claus, I think, can feel a little bit that way with that, but still one I like to have just because it feels so different from others. Next up, we've got Mandy. Mandy, nothing too notable on her victim rewards, and a very kind of vanilla effect of +2 damage to attacks made without weapons or items. So it just makes all your base attack stuff a lot better. If you know you're playing Mandy, you almost could be like, I'm not going to get a weapon because I know I'm going to unlock this ability. It's fine. Doesn't get me too excited, but not going to complain. Cassie is next up at number 12. Cassie does have some nice victim rewards. I love ones like take a sprint card, take a distraction card. I always like movement ones and horror reduction. Like it's hitting on a lot of what I like from victim rewards. Very interesting final ability here of you have to spend 6 time, which is in a standard round, how much all of your time, to double the damage of your next attack. And so this basically sets you up to try to do one really big thing at the end of the game of, your final attack, probably your final attack, because if you're using 6 time, you're not going to be able to buy very many cards. But it is kind of fun to be able to plan and try to make it happen and make this big attack happen. So I kind of like it, the satisfaction of kind of setting up the perfect situation to get that big attack. Next, we have Octavia, who's got some pretty standard victim rewards, but has kind of a unique ability here that you actually put a tracking marker on here. And every time you fail a horror roll or you rescue a victim, you get to upgrade this tracker. And then when you would take damage, you can move the tracker all the way down to prevent damage equal to where you are on the track. And so this is kind of cool because it hedges your bets a little bit of like, if you fail a roll, now you get like a little bit of benefit. It's like, okay, well, at least I moved up on this track. But it also sets you up to be able to, I can go into the killer space aggressively knowing I can take a big hit without a reaction card and get a hit on it. So I like the dynamic that's going on here with Octavia. Next we have number 10, Tally. Tally's good at, she's the reaction queen. So she's got ones that let her take guard and retaliate. She's got one of the most powerful victim rewards here, which is take any top item card. There's been a few final girls that have that. Hugely powerful, that you just get your pick of the 3 that are there without even having to go there. So that's awesome. But then once you flip her, she just is going to make you better with reactions. You get one immediately. You get a discount to getting them in the future. Down the home stretch in Final Girl, reactions are crucial because you need them to survive against the killer. So I do like what's going on there. Number 9, we have Rhonda. Always love to see a double horror reduction victim reward. When you unlock Rhonda, you can actually see me play a game with Rhonda. I think that's the one that I posted. Now I might be lying. I'll link it here though. There's a playthrough of me playing against the Iwis at Falconwood that I may or may not be Rhonda. But Rhonda has this ability that when the powers are revealed, you immediately get time equal to the Bloodlust level, which could potentially be a bunch of time. And then every time Bloodlust increases, you get time after that. And so time is the most flexible resource in the game because you can buy any types of cards with it. So this gives you a nice boost initially and then like a nice trickle of just having a little bit more to work with, which I like quite a bit. Next up, we've got Paula, as in Paula Deming from YouTube, formerly Things Getting Dicey. Probably botched that. But Promo Girl, based on a real person, also has some killer victim rewards here. Take any top item card and a move 2 spaces and a 2 time. I mean, these are quite good. When you get Paula's ability, this is a very fun one because every time you would roll only a single die, you get to roll 2 and pick whichever result you want, which is awesome and almost makes me want to put it higher. I think the reason it's not is because oftentimes I'm not rolling 1 die that often. You know, I'm trying to keep my horror level up that I'm rolling 2 or 3 dice. And so if that's the case, I'm like never using this unless something else comes up in the game. And so it potentially isn't going to trigger that often with the way that I'm playing the game. I will say the 2 time every time you get a victim is also nice. A lot of ones would only be like 1 time for that. But when her ability does come up, it is very fun to get to roll 2 and actually pick the better result. Next up, we have number 7, which is Megan. A nice double horror reduction and get a sprint card, some nice victim rewards. When the killer moves into your space or you move into theirs, you may recover health. And if you're already at full health, you reduce horror. I really like how this one plays into the dynamics of the end game because you now have this piece of, oh, when they come to me or I come to them, I can use that to my advantage. And I mean, healing in the end game is huge. That could be the difference between you being able to sustain a hit or not. Getting horror reduction in the end game is huge because if you can stay in the rolling 3 dice, that's going to help you so much. So I like this one and how you kind of can use it to your advantage with how you approach the killer in the end game. Let's see. Number 6, Janelle. Pretty standard victim rewards. Janelle is the counterpart to Octavia, who had the tracker. But in this case, the tracker is actually to increase the damage of attack instead of protecting you. And I think there's a few reasons this one ended up higher for me. One, attacking is kind of more fun. It's like more fun to pull off a big attack. And often that's really what you need in Final Girl is to figure out a way that you're going to get a big attack. I also like, though, that as you boost this one up, you're like guaranteed to get the benefits of going further up the track because it's just going to do that much additional damage. Where with Octavia, if you bump it to 5 or to 7 or whatever it was, and you were only going to take 3 damage, you use all of that to block that 3 damage. So it's kind of like the excess didn't help you. So I like here that you really can power this up and no matter what, it's gonna really help you to make a big attack. We are into the top 5. We've got Kenzie, pretty standard victim rewards, but a very flexible ability that once during every planning phase, you can take all copies of a single named action card for the price of 1. And so there's a lot of action cards where this is very useful. You could take 2 guards for just buying 1. You could take 2 sprints. You could even take like 2 distractions at the 3 cost point and really help your horror level. So I like it's in some ways kind of just a time efficiency thing. Like it's almost like a Final Girl that's just giving you more time. But it is fun to think of what are the 2 cards of the same that are most useful to me this time. And being able to kind of beef up your hand going into the next round. So I quite like that. Cindy, the elf, is number 4, and Cindy is all about moving. Move a space, move a space, move a space, move a space. And when you unlock her ability, it's if you fail when trying to walk or sprint, you still succeed. You get the lowest result. And so very simple, all about movement, not a lot of flexibility here. But let me tell you, Final Girl games, so much of it boils down to movement. And like the ability to move reliably and not fail a movement and have it throw off your whole plan is just huge. And so I just find that games are fun when you can move around the way that you want to, and Cindy is definitely helpful in doing that. Next up, we've got Jamie, as in Jamie from Foster the Meeple, another promo girl. Some pretty standard victim rewards here, but a very cool ability where she's the 2-star queen. When the final result of any horror roll is 2 stars, then you roll more than 2 stars. It's because the result is the 2-star level. You deal a damage to an enemy of your choice, and it doesn't have to be on your space. And it has to be natural stars to make this happen. But what I really like about this, one, is it's a way to do damage like without being with the killer, so you can kind of be strategic about it. But I like how it makes you play differently, because now it's like, okay, I really want to get up to 3 dice, because the more dice I'm rolling, the higher the odds are that I'm going to get 2 stars. I might want to get something like I think planning is the card that lets you roll more dice on a roll. And so working more ways into trying to beef up, maybe I let myself get hurt to get that extra die from being down to my last health, all because if I can get more 2-star results, I can do damage. So very, very cool one. And actually a killer, I keep saying killer as my adjective here. That's very on brand. Each additional victim saved, move a space. That's a great additional ability there. So very much like that one. My top 2 here are actually going to be a little bit similar. Christy, pretty standard. Well, got a double horror reduction. Always love that. But Christy's ability here is that during the killer phase, you draw 2 terror cards instead of 1, choose 1 to resolve, and shuffle the other one back into the deck. So much of Final Girl, like the unexpectedness of the terror deck, and just the things that can happen, it is so huge to be able to look at 2 and kind of have some control and avoid a really bad one at a bad time, but you're putting it back in the deck, and now I know that bad one's coming up at some point. How can I prepare for it? And so when I rank these, it isn't just what's the most powerful Final Girl. It's often what do I find the most interesting and fun to play. And this one adds such an interesting twist into the game with how you can manage that deck, have a little bit idea of what's coming, and avoid just those like game-ending horrible effects. So I'm a really big fan of that ability. And then we've got Gabrielle at number 1, who has a very similar ability, but this is that once per action phase, you may look at the top card of any deck or the Dark Power or Finale card. So this is very similar in that like you could choose to look at the top card of the Terror deck and know what's coming. You can't change it, but you could at least operate differently. But I think I put this one higher simply because of the flexibility of it. Because you could also look at the top of an item deck. I mean, that could be, there's times where it's like, do I go over to that place to search to try to find an item? Well, if I can peek and be like, yeah, that item is worth it, that's huge for me making that move. It could be really big to peek and look at the Finale card and just the ways that you can kind of strategically plan here. So really, really fun one. The sad caveat here is that Gabrielle did come from the from Destiny vignette, which is the vignette that I did not enjoy very much and am probably going to get rid of. So sadly, I think Gabrielle is going to be leaving my collection and go because I'll probably sell that as a set, which may seem weird as my top ranked one, but here's the reality. I probably at this point have 40 Final Girls. Like I don't, and I cycle through them. Like I intentionally play them evenly. So you're talking like 1 in every 40 games that I'd be playing any particular Final Girl. So I will survive despite very much liking Gabrielle's ability. Hey, thanks for watching. I've got links in the description below to everything, to all the different Final Girl sets that you could check out for yourself, as well as kind of the other Final Girl videos that I've posted on the channel. We got some other videos here for you to check out. I don't always game alone. I'm usually here with my brother Daniel talking about games. You could check out some of those, and we will see you in the next one.